Hi there. Welcome to Oaklandside 510. I'm Tasneem Raja, editor-in-chief of the Oaklandside, Oakland's independent nonprofit newsroom. Today, we're 4 months into 2026, and Oakland has had a genuinely eventful year. If you need help keeping up, we are here to help. I'm going to sit down with our deputy editor, Esther Kaplan, and our news editor, Darwin BondGraham, to take stock of 2026's biggest stories so far. Crime, school crisis, road safety, the mayor's first year, and the state of Oakland's arts and culture scene. After that, I'll catch you up on some other recent reporting from the Oaklandside about a major win for homeless families at Children's Hospital, a whistleblower shaking up the district attorney's office, a six-figure settlement over Oakland's bad roads, a sideshow ordinance that has never been used, and some really cool things to do this weekend and beyond. But first, a word from a local company supporting this podcast. Looking for workspace in Oakland? Check out WeWork's 2 locations, 1111 Broadway in City Center, just steps away from BART, and 2201 Broadway, a beautifully designed Art Deco space just a few blocks away. Between the two, you'll find flexible workspaces, meeting rooms, and a vibrant community with regular events and opportunities to connect, whether you're an individual or a growing team. You can book a tour at WeWork.com. And by the way, they're hosting an after-hours event at the 2201 Broadway location on May 1st. It's an art residency opening for Stephanie Hooper, a Chilean-born muralist and painter based in Oakland, who's also a longtime WeWork member. All right, let's get into it. We're going to help you, the Oakland resident, stay on top of the big stories in Oakland so far this year. Esther, Darwin, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
Okay, let's get started with crime, because it's the story a lot of Oaklanders are still processing. The last time we talked in depth about crime on the podcast was back in January, when our public safety reporter, Rosalind Romero, was reporting on the massive drop in gun violence and homicides back in 2025. Darwin, what are the numbers showing right now?
Yeah, the numbers are genuinely historic. Oakland ended 2025 with 67 homicides, the fewest since 1967. And the 2025 number was a 20% drop from 2024. Violent crime overall, assaults, robberies, rape, all saw significant drops. Auto thefts were down by nearly half last year, and that's continuing into 2026. Homicides are down this year by another 40% year over year so far. Robberies are down nearly 30%, and sexual assaults have declined nearly 50% compared to last year. The Oakland Police Department's weekly crime reports, which contain running totals for crime reported year over year, they use this blue-colored font to display negative numbers. And the sheets right now are almost entirely blue right now because we're seeing ongoing percentage declines in all types of crime this year compared to last year.
I mean, these are remarkable numbers. What do we think is actually driving this drop?
Yeah, so city leaders have some stock answers that they use when asked this question. They point to the rebooted ceasefire strategy that began in early 2024. That's the program that identifies the small number of individuals at highest risk of shooting or being shot. And it provides wraparound services alongside credible messenger outreach to try to get those individuals to change what they're doing.
Right.
Interim Police Chief James Beer also has credited surveillance technologies like the new license plate readers and the drones with helping officers seize hundreds of sideshow vehicles and recover guns and generally just fight crime. And there's been some genuine community cooperation with the police in ways that weren't always there before, especially early in the pandemic. Personally, I'm a little skeptical. I take a bit more of a global view. Violent crime dropped in most American cities over the past few years. And a lot of experts who are looking at that big nationwide decline, they say that the end of the pandemic, economic stabilization, the ability for communities to reestablish, social ties and solidarity, maybe the maturation of community violence intervention programs in a lot of communities, right? Like all that stuff may have played a part, and Oakland is probably benefiting from all those forces too.
Okay. Perspective that's worth keeping in mind whenever crime numbers go up and down. It's also worth noting, however, Darwin, I think that not everyone feels that crime has dropped in Oakland.
Right. There's a real gap between what the data shows and what people feel in their neighborhoods. The start of 2026 was still violent. 5 people were fatally shot in the first 4 days of January. And Oakland still has a lot more crime than comparable, mid-sized cities.
Right.
So it's like the progress is real, it's fragile, and it doesn't quite feel equally distributed across the city, I think, for a lot of people.
Got it. All right. Let's talk about Mayor Lee. She's been in office for just under a year now. She came in after the Shangtao recall and the FBI corruption investigation, and she won a very close special election. Darwin, how would you describe Mayor Lee's tenure as mayor so far?
She came in with a stabilization mandate, it seemed like, essentially the promise to be competent and steady after what felt to a lot of people like years of chaos.
Right.
Along with the city council, she passed a 2-year budget. They've managed to keep firehouses open and maintain some police staffing. I think the media hasn't been fixated on her compared to, her predecessors, which in Oakland politics can be quite the blessing.
Sure.
I think it means she isn't getting blamed every time that like a business is broken into or there's a shooting or there are other problems with illegal dumping and other nuisances. At the same time, Lee has been showing up, making public appearances, doing the stuff you expect mayors to do in terms of being present. She's put forward some solutions to some very basic problems, addressing the services gap that's really become a fundamental complaint of Oakland residents.
Right.
So she's tried to reform the city's busted permitting system, and she's made some major announcements around investing in road and sidewalk repairs, for example.
So, it's fair to say the news cycle, I think to a lot of people, is just feeling less chaotic compared certainly to the former mayor.
Definitely.
Okay. The big question, will she run again? We know Eli Wolf, one of our City Hall reporters, he recently reported that Lee has raised about $30,000 since the fall, which, is one signal that she's likely going to run for a full term in November. How does her path look if she does do that?
Yeah, that money is tiny, right, compared to the $580,000 she raised for the special election that got her elected. But it is a sign that she's laid the foundation to run again, and the intent is there. Lauren Taylor, who she narrowly beat in that special election, he published an op-ed recently saying, he hasn't ruled out another run. Mm-hmm. And there's a political action group, Revitalize Oakland, that raised nearly $700,000 last year from real estate, cryptocurrency, all sorts of other interests that backed Taylor against Lee. So the November race is genuinely open, but Lee has huge advantages. For example, her incumbency. Right.
Okay. Good to keep in mind. I want to go a little deeper into one aspect of Lee's tenure that Eli has been tracking pretty closely. This is her use of behested payments. So that means private fundraising to fill in gaps in city programs. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, we saw Libby Schaaf do a lot of this during her time as mayor.
Right.
So behested payments are when a public official personally solicits money from a company or a source, and they give it to a city program or some other kind of program in the community. Lee reported 15 of these last year, totaling just over $900,000. Some went to staff salaries in her own office, and some went to outside organizations like, working on gun violence prevention or arts and culture, immigration services. More recently, PG&E and Kaiser Permanente put together nearly $1 million to revive the city's police cadet program.
Wow.
That was a behested payment. Ethics experts note that this can create real and perceived conflicts of interest when the companies giving have business before the city.
Right.
But, it's a creative workaround of the budget crisis, so it doesn't come without complications.
Right. And of course, all tied up with any discussion about the mayor, another big City Hall story that we've been covering really all year for months and months is this proposal to reshape city government itself, perhaps moving Oakland into a strong mayor system. Catch us up on that.
Right. Mayor Lee set up this charter reform working group, and they've proposed giving the mayor veto power over the city council, including over the budget, and more direct control over city departments. This would be similar to how like some other city governments work, like San Francisco, for example. The council got its first look at this proposal last month. The reception was kind of mixed. Councilmember Ken Houston said he doesn't personally like the strong mayor model. The current at-large council member, Rowena Brown, she's very opposed to a provision that would actually eliminate her seat. There's also a competing proposal from a group that's led by former city administrator Stephen Falk. This proposal would strengthen the council instead of the mayor and make the mayor a member of the council rather than separate from it. Needless to say, like these kinds of changes like would have to go to voters at some point. It's early, but it's a debate that's worth watching.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Darwin. Okay, I want to turn to schools. So, Esther, you edit Ashley McBride on education. This has been a crisis all year. Where do things stand right now?
It really is a crisis, and it's been grinding along all year.
Yeah.
OUSD, Oakland Unified School District, has a roughly $100 million budget deficit, which is more than a tenth of its entire discretionary spending. It's no small thing. The district has committed to cutting 2/3 of its central office. There's been a big demand to focus cuts on the central office and recently approved more than 400 layoffs, but that still leaves the board with finding another $50 million in cuts for next year's budget. And that was even before major new agreements with teacher and staff unions that will cost the district tens of millions of dollars.
Wow. These are big, big numbers. Okay, so what do we know about what is actually getting cut at schools?
Well, beyond the office, obviously these cuts are extending right into school sites. That's where it hits families directly. Yeah. We're talking about attendance specialists, literacy coaches, community school managers, case managers, as well as some of the key roles at the central office that principals depend on to actually get stuff done, get stuff they need for their schools.
Yeah.
Several principals have told Ashley that many of these are the roles that hold things together. The people who know students by name, who catch the problems early, who make sure kids keep coming day after day. And keep in mind, low attendance eats into state revenue, which is attendance based. Right. So it could be a vicious cycle. The district is also proposing a $12 million cut to special education, which immediately raised flags, because federal law requires districts to maintain spending levels on that year over year.
Right. And of course, another big story on the schools beat, teachers nearly went on strike.
Yes, they did. Part of actually a wave of teacher strike votes that have swept the state.
Wow.
The Oakland Education Association voted overwhelmingly to authorize a strike in late February after 11 months of stalled negotiations. Then there was a deal reached at 3 a.m. one night after a marathon bargaining session, averting what would have been the third open-ended strike in just 7 years. But the district agreed to new labor contracts that add tens of millions of dollars of costs. And as of Ashley's most recent reporting, the board hasn't fully explained how it will cover them.
Wow.
That includes a second contract with SEIU that raised the abysmally low pay, frankly, for many school support roles. But again, it adds costs that are unfunded. So the strike threat passed, but these underlying financial tensions persist.
Yep. And you guys have been focusing a lot on the fact that on the leadership front at OUSD, there is a big open question.
Right. Who's going to be the superintendent?
Right. Who's going to be leading all of this?
The search is still open. People may remember the last superintendent's contract was ended early. There's been an interim superintendent in place, Denise Sadler. The board hired a search firm back in October, aiming to name a permanent successor. They said by April, but hey.
Yeah, it's April.
Yeah, and it hasn't happened yet. So we don't know. Generally, observers seem to think Sadler may be campaigning for the role. She's been showing up personally at schools in crisis. She's been pushing on hard decisions like school closures or mergers. She's not been acting like a seat warmer.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Before we move off of schools, Esther, just hit us with some good news on the Oakland schools front.
Well, here's some excellent news. A story we did the other day. Almost all of OUSD's drinking water sources are now safe.
That is a big, big change.
Huge relief for those of us who are parents. 18 months after Ashley first broke the lead contamination story, a story, by the way, that just won a Free Speech and Open Government Award from the First Amendment Coalition, only 2 faucets district-wide remain out of service over contamination. Yeah, it's great. So at the height of the crisis, people may remember in August 2024, unsafe lead levels had been found at hundreds of fixtures at dozens of schools. Mm-hmm. And the district has also launched a new public dashboard, which shows the water testing results for every fixture. So that's easier to track yourself as a concerned teacher, parent. So this is all a genuine win. And I really want to shout out Ashley and her co-reporter, Callie Rhodes, for bringing this crisis to light.
Absolutely.
Another bright spot, one of Oakland's largest high schools, Skyline High, was recently named one of the top senders to the University of California system.
Right.
So of all high schools statewide that send large numbers of students to UCs, Skyline had the largest proportion of students from low-income families.
Wow.
Which is kind of a beautiful story about Oakland public schools being a real engine for social mobility.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Esther, I want to move to another beat you cover, roads and road safety, because Jose Formoso has been doing some of the most read reporting in our newsroom this year on that beat. And speaking of good news, there's definitely been some on his beat.
Yes, quite a bit of it, actually. Let's start with International Boulevard. That's been one of Oakland's most dangerous corridors for years. Yeah. And the city installed a dedicated bus lane there, and disaster ensued. Between 2020 and 2023, 15 pedestrians were killed there. Cars were speeding on the dedicated bus lane.
Yeah.
So then starting in summer of 2024, after a lot of community outcry, AC Transit and Oakland's Transportation Department added plastic bollards to physically block regular traffic from entering that lane. And the results have been dramatic. Pedestrian deaths on that road dropped from 7 in 2023 to 4 in 2024 to 0 in 2025.
Oh, that's great to hear. Another really popular recent story that Jose reported was about the speed cameras going live. This has been fascinating.
Yes. So as of January, there are now 18 spots in the city with automated speed cameras.
Wow.
They were put up on Oakland's high injury network, the streets with the worst crash histories. So after a 60-day warning period, the real ticketing began last month around March 15th. And Jose just reported on what the warning period data revealed, which was 140,000 warning letters.
Wow.
Which went out to about 75,000 unique license plates in 5 weeks.
I mean, I have to say, those are much bigger numbers than I was expecting.
Agree. And there's something really interesting Jose noticed, which is of those unique vehicles that got warnings, about 48,000 got only one, which in his eyes suggested maybe some drivers got the message and slowed down, which is really what we want.
Right. Absolutely. And one thing I have found really interesting about his reporting is all of the ticket revenue from these tickets coming from these cameras has to go back into traffic slowing infrastructure. So it can't just go into the city's general fund.
Yeah, this is a great aspect of the state law that authorized this pilot program. So as Jose formulates it, the cameras can actually function as a diagnostic tool. They can show the city exactly where road design is making people want to speed, giving them a chance and the funds to fix the design, reduce the speeding, and over time, maybe reduce the need for those cameras.
Okay. If you want to go deeper into speed cameras and the privacy concerns around them, check out a previous episode of this podcast where we sat down with Jose on just that. I want to end this conversation on arts and culture. You know, we all know this is a huge part of Oakland's identity. But when we're talking about crime and budgets and data, I think our arts and culture landscape too often just gets overlooked. Right now, arts and culture in Oakland is facing a lot of real threats. And it's also, as we've been reporting, showing real resilience. Esther, I want to start with the funding picture here. Fill us in.
Right. So last year's city budget eliminated this one critical role, the cultural affairs manager. Mm-hmm. And that's just one of many sacrifices that were made to close a $130 million budget shortfall. Yep. So the Cultural Affairs Division attracts grants for Oakland's festivals, youth programming like the Prescott Circus, Living Jazz, dance programming. It breathes life into the city's culture. Yeah, it's kind of a unseen, perhaps invisible force shaping a lot of what we see as Oakland. Yes. And its budget is tiny. It's less than 1% of the city's total. But as Roberto Bedoya, the city's former cultural affairs manager, warned at a council meeting, zeroing it out would prevent the city from forming outside partnerships with foundations to match those funds. Mm-hmm. So eliminating that role was essentially the equivalent of dismantling the infrastructure that connects Oakland artists to money. Yeah. I really appreciate that our reporting connects these dots for people, helps them understand some of the behind the scenes work that it takes to bring these kinds of performances and, arts organizations to life here. As we reported, the position was ultimately restored. It was, after sustained advocacy. Yeah. Hundreds of people showed up to that council meeting to fight the cuts. The city reinstated that position in December. And in January, Liz Luke, who had been the director of Living Jazz, was hired in the role. So her job, it's not easy. It will be to raise money from county, state, federal, philanthropic sources to support our beloved Oakland arts ecosystem. Mm-hmm. And she's walking into a complicated moment. It's a tough economy. And of course, random, unexpected federal cuts just come down the pike at all times. So an important piece of the puzzle is back, but the environment is tougher than it's been in years. Yeah. And yet, as we've seen in story after story from Azucena, Oakland's art scene just keeps showing up. It really does. The Grand Lake Theater just turned 100, a century of showing films in Oakland, still going strong. Amazing. Check out Azu's lovely story. The Black Joy Parade, again, this year drew tens of thousands of participants in February, this time with a theme of Black is the Blueprint. And it closed out with Grammy-winning R&B singer Maya. The Henry J. Kaiser Center for the Arts, which is that grand, imposing building near Lake Merritt, reopened after years of renovations and has already hosted a Black History celebration, a Kamala Harris talk, a musical, and much more. I just saw SF Opera put on a performance of La Boheme over the weekend, and I got to go with my daughter. It was amazing. It's a beautiful space, right? And First Fridays are back for spring. I caught the first one. It was a blast. We've also seen some hometown heroes soar and lift up Oakland and the entire nation. I think it's fair to say Director Ryan Coogler won his first Oscar for Sinners. Skater Alyssa Liu brought home Olympic gold. She sure did. And Azucena Raja, our arts and culture reporter, has been covering all of this. Every week there's more. Yeah, there's a recent story we did on Alyssa Liu that I just wanted to make sure listeners have a chance to check out. So we recently reported on a new mural, not the first one. There's a second one now going up at the Oakland Ice Center. And speaking of most read pieces this year, this has been just one of the most popular. Yeah, the first mural from the Illuminaries went up in Temescal, featuring Liu making what I've now learned is called a thiz face. That's right. The second one is on the wall of the Oakland Ice Center, Liu's home ice, where muralist Julie Engelman is painting her alongside 1992 Olympic gold medalist Christy Yamaguchi, both Asian American women. Yeah. Both wore gold when they won gold. Both have roots to that exact rink. They practice there. Cool. Yeah. That is great. Guys, thank you so much, Darwin, Esther. This is just, I think, exactly the conversation that we need at this moment. It's the full picture. We just ended the first quarter of the year, and here in Oakland, there's just been so much going on. Hard stuff, hopeful stuff. I just really appreciate you guys kind of catching us up and getting us oriented. It's going to be a big year to come with an election. It's just good to have this ground under our feet. Thanks, guys.
Definitely. Thanks, Tasneem.
Thanks, Tasneem.
You can find all the reporting we talked about today at oaklandside.org. We'll link to everything in the show notes. Let's get into headlines, some more recent reporting from our newsroom. There's more in the full stories, which we will link to in the show notes, and you can always find at oaklandside.org. Sign up for our daily newsletter if you want to get our reporting in your inbox. We're going to start with a good news story from our housing reporter, Natalie Ornstein. A new joint program between UCSF Benioff Children's Hospital, the Oakland Housing Authority, and the Alameda Alliance for Health will place 50 homeless patient families in housing. Social workers at the hospital, which serves some of the most critically ill children in the region, including premature babies in the NICU, have long struggled with a brutal reality: families whose children are discharged into homelessness. A baby might go home dependent on equipment that needs to be plugged in, or medication that needs to be refrigerated. Now, under this program, which is called Building Bridges, Hospital to Home, eligible families will pay just $250 a month toward rent for up to 5 years, with the Oakland Housing Authority covering the rest. They'll also get $1,600 a year toward basic needs and 2 years of utility assistance. To make all of this happen, the Oakland Housing Authority is contributing up to about $5 million in rental assistance. Alameda Alliance is putting in a little over $1 million drawn from a state homelessness and housing fund, and 2 families have already been placed. One of those 2 families is comprised of a single mom and her son, born with congenital heart defect. They'd been turned away from a shelter, and within 2 months of his surgery, they were living in an apartment near the hospital. Darwin BondGraham broke a significant story this week. A deputy district attorney has filed a whistleblower complaint accusing District Attorney Ursula Jones Dixon and senior attorneys in the Alameda County DA's office of retaliation. Deputy District Attorney Alexander Grainer filed a 42-page complaint with the county in February. She alleges that the DA's office mishandled a serious conflict of interest when the civil grand jury was investigating the DA's office itself. It claims the office never fully walled itself off from advising the jury during that investigation. She also alleges that the office has been engaging in practices around welfare fraud prosecutions that amount to extortion, pressuring defendants to repay money under threat of criminal charges. And she claims that after she raised these concerns with Jones Dixon, she was transferred to a low-level assignment and eventually placed on administrative leave. The DA's office has called the welfare fraud practices longstanding, lawful, and fair, and says there's no extortion. Jones Dixon's office declined to comment on pending litigation. This is a story with a lot of layers. I really encourage you to read Darwin's full investigation at oaklandside.org. Now, here is a frustrating accountability story from Eli Wolf. In June 2023, Oakland passed an ordinance specifically targeting sideshows, giving the city the power to impose fines of up to $5,000 for repeat violations and even shut down the social media accounts used to organize the sideshows. At the time, an OPD officer told the city council that the law was well-crafted and would absolutely give police the authority to hold sideshow participants accountable. Nearly 3 years later, the city acknowledges it has never once used the ordinance. No fines, no injunction, and the city attorney confirmed no cases have ever been referred for prosecution. OPD has continued using other laws, like towing cars, making arrests for reckless driving, but the civil enforcement tools that the council approved have sat completely unused, with city officials offering no explanation. Council member Charlene Wong told Eli she's concerned that this reflects a broader pattern, pointing to Oakland's similarly weak record of collecting fines from illegal dumpers. Here's one from Jose Formoso. Oakland just approved a roughly $500,000 settlement with a cyclist who was seriously injured after hitting a pothole on East 21st Street in 2023. The cyclist, a longtime special education teacher at Oakland schools, was ejected from his bike and suffered lacerations, broken bones, and nerve damage. This is the second major road settlement that Oakland has approved so far this year. In March, the city paid $400,000 to settle a separate pothole lawsuit. And over the last decade, Oakland has paid out close to $50 million in settlements for road-related injuries. Jose has been reporting all year on the connection between deferred road maintenance and real human cost. This is another concrete example of what that looks like. Another accountability story from Eli Wolf. A class action lawsuit forced OPD to clear its backlog of public records requests and comply with California's transparency law going forward. But according to an attorney who's been monitoring the department's compliance, OPD is backsliding badly. As of last month, there were over 1,100 open public records requests to OPD, and more than 900 of them were past due. The attorney, Sam Ferguson, found that OPD has also abandoned its promise to give individualized responses, instead sending the same boilerplate PDF forms to virtually everyone, including the same form with the same typo sent to many different requesters over months. Ferguson has now threatened to drag the city back to court if OPD doesn't fix this. OPD did not respond to the Oaklandside's interview request for this story. All right, I want to tell you about a few events happening in Oakland this week that you don't want to miss. On Saturday, April 25th, the Prescott Circus Theater presents Show Love. It's a free spring showcase at the Malanga Cascalord Center featuring students from over 10 Oakland public schools. The Prescott Circus has been helping Oakland kids develop creativity and physical skills through tumbling, unicycling, and juggling since 1985. Shows are free, though donations support teaching artists and production costs. Okay, here's one for anybody who's been spending too much time on their phone. This Saturday at Snow Park, there is a free Outdoor Earth Month event organized by Hella Plants Market, Town Strides, and BLK. That's a dating app for Black singles, aimed at getting Oakland residents off their screens and outside. You can expect a yoga class, a workshop on sustainable gardening, and the chance to just hang out and meet people in real life. And by the way, mark your calendars for May 8th. The Henry J. Kaiser Center for the Arts is hosting a nonpartisan housing forum featuring the candidates for California governor. The event is being put on by the Housing Action Coalition, the New York Times, and UC Berkeley's Turner Center for Housing Innovation. It'll be moderated by Times opinion writer Ezra Klein. State Assembly member Buffy Wicks will give opening remarks. It's a chance to hear directly from the candidates on one of California's most pressing issues before the June primary. All right, that is it for headlines. We will link to all of this reporting in the show notes. That's this week's episode of Oaklandside 510. You can find all the stories we talked about today at oaklandside.org. Sign up for the daily newsletters to get our reporting delivered to your inbox. If you haven't already, write me a review on Apple Podcasts. I love reading those. This episode was produced by Mark Nieto, edited by Darwin BondGraham and Esther Kaplan, and hosted by me, Oaklandside Editor-in-Chief, Tasneem Raja. On behalf of our entire newsroom, thank you for showing up for Oakland. We will see you next week.